to the NFL and let's go to the Queen City, home of the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is something I've been wanting to talk about for the last few weeks, so let's talk about it. The Cincinnati Bengals and Shemar Stewart are in a standoff in contract negotiations for the rookie. The Bengals drafted Stewart with the 17th overall pick in this year's draft out of Texas A&M, and Shemar Stewart left mandatory minicamp amid prolonged contract negotiations. Just to give y'all some insight on the feud and the issue between the Bengals and Shemar Stewart, the disagreement reportedly centers on a clause Cincinnati wants to include in the first rounder's rookie deal that would allow the club to avoid future guarantees under certain conditions. The specific language apparently isn't in Amarius Mims' 2024 rookie deal, the Bengals' previous top pick. So, as I evaluate this situation involving Shemar Stewart and the Cincinnati Bengals, and also All-Pro edge rusher Trey Hendrickson is entering the final year of his contract, seeking an extension from the Bengals. My first thought when it comes to these contract disputes with the Cincinnati Bengals and Shemar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson is, here we go again. The Cincinnati Bengals, yet again, are having off-the-field distractions with contract negotiations. This time, it's involving Shemar Stewart. Poor Shemar Stewart, he's new and fresh into the NFL as a rookie. Breath smelling like Similac, as some people say, doesn't really know much of anything, doesn't know any better, and he's already in a contract negotiation with the Cincinnati Bengals. Do y'all know what the Cincinnati Bengals remind me of? We all have, male and women, male, female, we all have that one friend who has been in multiple relationships, in multiple marriages. And you may have a friend that has been married 3 times. And the third time you sit down with your friend, they are going through another divorce for the third time. And the first time when they went through a divorce, you were thinking like, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You're my friend. I want to trust and believe that your side of the story is true. They go through another divorce. You want to believe yet again that your friend's side of the story is true. By the third time, your friend going through another divorce, you starting to think like maybe it's not them, it's you that's the problem. And that's exactly how I feel about the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have had countless situations involving star players in contract negotiations, dating back to the days of Corey Dillon, for crying out loud. Remember Corey Dillon was going through contract negotiations and finally decided, if I want to position myself to win a Super Bowl, I need to get the hell out of Cincinnati. And he went to New England and won a Super Bowl. And the Cincinnati Bengals, they had contract negotiations last year with Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is the best receiver in the NFL, and the Bengals had the nerve, the audacity to go through contract negotiations with Jamar Chase. So much so that because the Bengals played games in their contract negotiations with Jamar Chase just went out there last year and balled out and won the Triple Crown, and then the Bengals had to pay Ja'Marr Chase a bunch more money than they would have had to pay him had they paid him prior to last season. They played games multiple years with T. Higgins, and so they had to pay T. Higgins because Joe Burrow demanded that the Bengals pay T. Higgins. Make no mistake about it. If it were not for Joe Burrow, T. Higgins would not be in Cincinnati. He's only in Cincinnati because of Joe Burrow. So the Bengals are like that friend who went through one or two marriages and they went through a divorce, and you're giving them the benefit of the doubt in the first two marriages and that ended up divorces, and then that third one you like, it's not them, it's you. That's the Cincinnati Bengals, and Shemar Stewart is just the latest example of the Cincinnati Bengals not being able to get this right. And again, not only are they in contract negotiations with Shemar Stewart, they also are in contract negotiations with their best defensive player in Trey Hendrickson. Last year, Trey Hendrickson had 17 and a half sacks. He was by far the best player on the Bengals defense. And that's another thing. Beggars can't be choosers. The Bengals defense last year, they finished bottom 10 in yards and in points allowed last year in the NFL. The Bengals, offensively, they were arguably the best offense in the NFL with Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and T. Higgins. But they didn't make the playoffs, which was a damn shame because their defense couldn't stop a cold. Hell, my boy CJ, we can go out there and we can score some points against that Bengals defense. That's how bad they were last year. They were pathetic defensively. And they brought in Al Golden, the former defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. And so they believe that Al Golden is going to help the Bengals from a defensive standpoint. And they fired Lou Admiral last year. And Lou Admiral, to me, was not the issue. The issue was the Bengals' defensive personnel. That was their issue last year. Lou Admiral was not a bad defensive coordinator. I don't believe that Al Golden is going to put together this elite scheme for this Bengals defense and make them a better defensive team than what they had with Lou Admiral. So, again, beggars cannot be choosers. And the Bengals need all the help they can get with Shemar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson. Now, I do feel like, though, with the Trey Hendrickson situation is interesting because Trey Hendrickson is 30 years old and he wants to get paid like he's an elite pass rusher. And he is an elite pass rusher, but he wants to be paid like it. And the only thing that I understand from the Bengals' perspective in the Trey Hendrickson negotiations, Trey Hendrickson is 30. So he's starting to get up in age. And Hendrickson, he wants to be paid like some of these other elite pass rushers. I'm looking at the top 5 paid pass rushers in the NFL. Myles Garrett at number 1. Micah Parsons at number 2. TJ Watt at number 3. And Aiden Hutchinson at number 4. Now, the thing is with Trey Hendrickson, he's 30. Myles Garrett is also 30. TJ Watt, I believe, is 30. But Micah Parsons and Aiden Hutchinson and Nick Bosa are all younger than Trey Hendrickson is. They're all younger. So from the Bengals' perspective, I understand why the Bengals may not want to give Trey Hendrickson this long, extended deal for 3 or 4 years when Trey Hendrickson may not be at his best 3 or 4 years from now. I think the Bengals have a 2-year window with Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and T. Higgins to win a Super Bowl. And so I would definitely bring back Trey Hendrickson on a 2-year deal and max him out. But I wouldn't give Trey Henderson a 4-year deal, because I believe when you pay a player, you want to pay a player based on how he's going to perform after he gets his contract. That's the thing. If you're an organization or a team, players want to be paid based on how they have performed prior to contract negotiations, which I 100% understand. But from an organization standpoint, I have to pay you based on how you are going to perform throughout the duration of this contract. I can't just pay you based on what you've already earned. Now, I know it's crazy to think about, but I'm not thinking about it from a player's perspective anymore. I'm thinking about it from an organizational standpoint and their perspective, how they feel about it. If I'm going to pay a player, I have to pay you based on how you're going to perform in that particular contract. And so I believe that the Bengals should give Henderson a 2-year deal and max him out. I mean, give him a 2-year deal, $20 million, $25 million, $30 million, whatever, max him out, because that's the Super Bowl window for the Cincinnati Bengals team anyway. But for the life of me, I can't understand why the Bengals have not came to an agreement with their 17th overall pick in this year's NFL draft. It was their first pick in the NFL draft this year, and Shemar Stewart. And they were ranked in the bottom 10 in yards allowed and in points allowed last year. So they don't really have much to choose from here. And so, yet again, here we go again with the Bengals and contract negotiations. And this is a part of the reason why the Bengals get off to these slow starts. I mean, let's be honest. This is why they get out to these slow starts. And so they got to figure this out. They got to figure this out, because when training camp begins, you don't want to have this lingering over the football team. You want your rookie defensive end in Shemar Stewart and your best defensive player in Trey Henderson in training camp ready to rock and roll. So they got to get this figured out. They got to get this figured out quick, fast, and in a hurry, because we know how elite the offense is going to be. With Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase, and with T. Higgins, they are a top 5 offense in the NFL. They got a top 5 quarterback in Joe Burrow. They got the best receiver in the NFL in Jamar Chase. And they have one of the top number 2 receivers in the NFL in T. Higgins. I think Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are the best duo at the receiver position. Yes, I would take Chase and Higgins over Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Yes, I would take Chase and Higgins over Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Okay, so I believe that the Bengals got to get this thing figured out with Shemar Stewart and Trey Henderson. And you just can't give the Bengals the benefit of the doubt, because they've done this time and time and time again. For Shemar Stewart, and honestly, this was so crazy. Draft night, me personally, it didn't really look like Shemar Stewart was ecstatic to be drafted by the Bengals. It really didn't. Maybe it was just me. I don't know. To me, Shemar Stewart, he looked depressed when he heard his name being drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. It looked like the brother didn't want to be in Cincinnati. I'm just being honest, folks. Seriously. He did not seem to be excited about coming to the Queen City. And now, before he could even get his rookie campaign started, he's already going through contract negotiations. You cannot make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. And last year, the Bengals missed the playoffs. They finished the season 9-8. They missed the playoffs last year. Why did the Bengals miss the playoffs last year? Because they lost week 1 to the New England Patriots. That's why they missed the playoffs. Now, they finished the season 9-8. At one point last year, they were 4-8. So they finished the season on a 5-game winning streak. But it was too little too late for the Cincinnati Bengals. They have to get off to better starts. And I've said in prior years, Zach Taylor needs to be investigated for what the hell he is doing in the offseason. Why does he not ever have the Bengals prepared once the season begins? The Bengals, year in and year out, get off to these slow starts. And last year, it cost them a playoff spot. Because when you have an elite season like Joe Burrow had last year, when you have an elite season the way that Jamar Chase had last year, that's a team that should have been in the playoffs and making noise. Now, remember in the first round of the NFL playoffs last year, the Broncos played the Bills in Buffalo. Could y'all imagine if Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins played in the wild card game against the Bills? The Bills would have been sweating in that wild card game. Seriously. That's how great the Bengals offensively is as a football team. But they got to fix their defense. If the Bengals can have an average defense, forget about elite. If they can just put together an average defense, the Bengals would be Super Bowl contenders. But until they fix that defense, not only will they not be playoff contenders, but they will not even compete in the AFC North. They got to get a better defense. And I don't understand why they fired Lou Admiral. I thought Lou Admiral was a good defensive coordinator. But maybe they think Al Golden can put together a great scheme and they can play some better defense this season compared to what they played last year, because they have nowhere to go but up. I mean, last year they were pathetic defensively. So they better get Shemar Stewart and Trey Hitcherson into the Bengals facility quick, fast, and in a hurry. That way they can get out to a better start at the beginning of the season and put themselves in a position to be in the playoff conversation in November and December.